Wow, you really quieted down for me. I'm impressed. Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Neely from the English department, and I want to thank you all for coming out this evening and just say hello to everyone watching on the live stream. I know there's a lot of you out there. I can't tell you how delighted I am to welcome Ball State graduate, podcaster, educator, philanthropist, magazine writer, and New York Times best-selling author, Ashley C. Ford, to this stage. And I think it says something about Ashley's brilliance, determination, and generosity of spirit that I had to narrow that list of accolades down about 3 times before I could say it in one breath. So there's a lot more that she does, but those are some bright points. So we're so lucky to have Ashley serving as our writer-in-residence at Ball State this fall. And in visits over the next 3 months, she will meet with students, faculty, and community members for a series of events. First, tonight's reading. Following that, on Thursday, October 7th at 7:30 p.m. in Sursa Hall, President Mearns will interview Ashley about her time as a student here at Ball State and her memoir, Somebody's Daughter. On Friday, October 8th, the following day, the Office of Inclusive Excellence is hosting an event where Ashley will join Facing Project founder and also Ball State grad J.R. Jameson for a conversation about their recently published books. And that will be at 7 p.m. in Cardinal Hall. And then our November event is Thursday, November 11th, and I hope you'll join us in the Student Center Ballroom for a book club-style discussion about Somebody's Daughter, moderated by English professor and memoirist Jill Chrisman. Before that event, you can go to our All Things Ashley C. Ford page and submit questions to add to the conversation, and that's bsu.edu/writer-in-residence. Related event I'd like to mention is on October 27th, the English department will be hosting 2 other writers and Ball State graduates, Sarah Hollowell and Jay Coles, who will also be reading from their new books. A lot of Ball State grads publishing books this year, so I'm very happy to say that. And that's in AJ 175 at 7 p.m. on October 27th. So you'll hear more about Ashley here in a moment, but first I need to acknowledge the many people who have dedicated their time and goodwill to make this event possible. Thank you to President Mearns, Mrs. Jennifer Mearns, and to Stephanie Arrington and Gail Werner from the President's Office for their vision, dedication, and a lot of patience as we navigated the many details that make events like this possible. Thank you to Dean McCarthy, Pat Collier, and Ellen Good in the College of Sciences and Humanities. Thank you to my co-coordinator, Jill Chrisman, and my English department colleagues, especially Sean Lovelace, Susanna Benko, Melissa Hull, Catherine Gardner, and the Compass Creative team. And thank you to Marketing and Communications for all their help with publicizing these events, and to the Ball State Bookstore, who's out there in the lobby. If you need a copy of the book, it will be there for you. And Ashley will be available to sign books after the event in the lobby. So I want to express my deep gratitude also to the co-sponsors and organizers who have helped us reach as wide an audience as possible: the Office of Inclusive Excellence, the Multicultural Center, the African American Studies and Women and Gender Studies programs, the Office of Community Engagement, the Schaefer Leadership Academy, Motivate Our Minds, the Youth Opportunity Center, Burris Laboratory School, and the Muncie Community Schools. I'm delighted but not surprised to find so many people working so hard to make Ball State and our surrounding community a better place for all of us. It's now my pleasure to introduce one of those outstanding community leaders. Mitch Isaacs is the executive director of the Schaefer Leadership Academy, also a Ball State grad. He has a BA from Ball State and a master's degree in student affairs and higher education from Indiana State. He's president of the Country Village Creekwood Neighborhood Association and a great friend to the Muncie community. sitting on the boards of Motivate Our Minds, the Indiana Leadership Association, Muncie Action Plan, and Muncie Rotary. He has served as a mentor for project leadership and Big Brothers Big Sisters, and is a member of the Burris Laboratory School Advisory Council. Mitch and his family who are here tonight are some of the most big-hearted and generous people I know, and if you've read Somebody's Daughter, you'll know that the Isaacs became a kind of second family to Ashley during her time here in Muncie. I'm grateful to Mitch for working every day to make our community a better place and for being here tonight. Please welcome Mitch Isaacs.
Thank you, Mark, for the kind and gracious introduction. Now it's my honor to introduce Ashley C. Ford. Introductions are commonly used to cite activities and accomplishments in order to establish a speaker's credibility. However, I'd like to use this introduction tonight to establish Ashley's relatability. Please raise your hand if you're a Ball State University student. Thank you. As you may already know, Ashley is a graduate of this university. You may know about her time as the president of Student Voluntary Services, or as a participant in the Excellence in Leadership program, or as an employee in the Career Center, or as a student in the Department of English, or her many other campus activities. But you may not know that Ashley struggled, as some of you no doubt struggle, to balance the demands placed on her as a college student. Like you, Ashley sometimes doubted herself. Like you, Ashley looked for ways to make things work, even in those moments when it feels like nothing is working at all. And like you undoubtedly will, Ashley found her best path forward. Please raise your hand if you're a member of the Muncie, Delaware County community. As you may already know, Ashley writes about our community in her book. She knows our streets, she knows our people, and she understands our little corner of the world. But you may not know that while Ashley's time in our community was short, she was engaged. She volunteered at places like Motivate Our Minds, Second Harvest Food Bank, Albany Elementary, and several local retirement homes. Ashley didn't just reside here. She made our community her home. Please raise your hand if you are a faculty or staff member who plays a role in educating students. As you already know, Ashley's book, along with so much of her work, provides an opportunity for understanding. Like you, Ashley is an educator. Like you, she is deeply interested in sharing her insights in order to help others reach new understandings. But you may not know how she lives out those ideas in every part of her life. Even though I started as her teacher, Ashley has taught me more than I've ever taught her. She is an old soul, anchored by a pragmatic optimism which makes her as compelling as it does sensible. Ashley sees the hurt, the wounded, and the insecure side of humanity and names it for what it is, with compassion and empathy. She isn't self-righteous. She simply wants to share what is true and just. And finally, please raise your hand if you see yourself as a member of the human community. I hope that's everyone. As you know, Ashley's story is full of universal experiences such as pain, humor, and hope. But you may not know that these things have provided Ashley with a rare authenticity which draws people to her before they even realize they're in her orbit. She engages people, all kinds of people, from every walk of life, in fundamental and deeply human ways. Ashley understands that she is a part of the most important tribe of all, the human one. She treats people accordingly. In return, all types of people recognize her into one of their own. It's how Ashley can walk into a room and engage people like Oprah, Brene Brown, Trevor Noah, and immediately belong, even when she feels like she doesn't. Ashley engages people's humanity. It's the universal key that unlocks all doors. And I have no doubt that tonight, Ashley will unlock something in all of us. It is my honor to welcome my friend, my family, my teacher, Ashley C. Ford, to the stage.
Oh my gosh. Mitch is one of like 5 men I trust, but he's a fantastic person. Thank you so much, Mitch. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for those of you who are watching. And thank you to President Mearns, the Multicultural Center, and Schaefer Leadership Academy for bringing me here, for supporting my effort to get more books into the community, and for the opportunity to address you guys here tonight. I think this is gonna be a lot of, Mr. Caffey? Sorry guys, that is my high school band director who probably thought I wouldn't recognize him. A lot of people helped get me here today. Mr. Caffey is one of them. Mitch and Becky are some of them. Even Charlie and Wilson, who, if you know them, are very young but very powerful young people. I'm very honored, very lucky. I had a conversation with a friend a little bit ago, probably about 3 weeks ago, where he said, Ashley, do you remember when you were leaving Ball State and you said, this is probably the last time I'll be on this campus because they'll probably never have a reason to invite me back. I do remember saying that. And I'm really glad I was super wrong. I've been invited back even before this moment, and I'm so happy and so grateful to be a part of the Ball State community. I know that a lot of us, while we're here, wonder what this place is going to mean to us when we're gone. And it's going to mean exactly what you allow it to mean. So have the kind of time here that you want to have, so that you can leave with the memories you want to have. That would be a really good idea. I'm going to read to you today from my memoir, Somebody's Daughter. I am going to read chapter 7 of this book, and this is probably the core chapter of my book that gives you the best idea of what it's about and what I'm about. So I hope you really like it. I will probably intersperse different moments by coming on here and telling you random stories that add a little bit to the part I just read, but that's only because if I just stand up here and read to you from this book for a whole chapter, you're not gonna have a good time. Not because the book isn't good, but because it's kind of never fun to sit and listen to somebody read for like a half hour, right? So, unless it's an audiobook, which I have one of those, you can get that too if you want. So I'm gonna talk to you as I read to you. And if you have some questions at the end, I'm gonna try to leave room for that. Because my favorite thing when I come to campus is being able to talk to the students and staff who are here currently or the people who live in this community. So don't hesitate and think about your questions as we go. Cool? Cool. My mother wanted to be with her boyfriend. He wanted to be with her too. But there was distance and youth, and there always seemed to be some other woman involved. It would not last between them. He'd come into her life quickly, and he left the same way. The culmination of the first phase of that relationship, the baby, my second brother, was born without ever breathing. My grandmother said he was born small and gray, with an exposed serpentine spine. When she repeated this story, she would push up her glasses, wrinkle her nose, and use her index finger to make a wavy line in the air to illustrate the curve of his body. She said my mother held him for hours, kissed the top of his head, rocked him against her chest. My mother hadn't wanted to have another baby, not without being married, but abortion wasn't an option, and he kept growing inside her. My mother could not fathom what kind of good Christian woman would end the life of a child even if she was in no position to provide for him, and my mother very much wanted to be a good Christian woman. Still, she did not want to be pregnant, and when the baby was born, already dead, she blamed her desire to be free for his passing. She named him after his father. She did not mark his grave. My mother came home to us raw and all alone. My grandmother told me she sat in the bathtub for hours, bleeding into the water. She stared into the space between herself and the walls, her body purging its sin, staining the off-white fiberglass. Her silence worried my brother and me for reasons we couldn't grasp just yet. He and I would sit close enough to hear the water make small splashes when she adjusted herself, making sure she wasn't giving up on her breathing or living, that she wasn't giving up on us. On the other side of the door, my mother sent noiseless prayers into her bath water, repenting in spontaneous expulsions, oblivious to the world growing red around her. Grandma and my mother's sisters wanted her to be well. They took her back to the man who had delivered baby Daryl and the hole in his back. They told him my mother's symptoms because she'd lost her voice, somewhere down in her chest, somewhere they couldn't reach in and grab it. She'd stopped trying to find her voice days before. She was content in her silence, in her bleeding, and in her inevitable demise. The doctor told my grandmother it was psychosomatic. My grandmother called him a quack and a demon. He said, "There's no reason for her to be bleeding anymore. She's using her mind to punish herself. She won't get better until she chooses to get better." Someone decided my brother would stay with my mother, and I would leave with my grandmother. We moved to her father's, my great-grandfather's farmhouse in Columbia, Missouri. A few years later, when I couldn't quite remember the worst of this time, I would ask why I was sent off with Grandma Billy before kindergarten. I would be told, "Because you said you wanted to go." I disappeared into a new life in Missouri, a life without either brother, living or dead, and a grandmother who put strawberries and whipped cream on my waffles without blood under her nails. There was no one for me to protect or worry over. I missed my mother, but less and less every day. To keep me company, I had a dog, a goat, and a great-grandfather who threw hammers at wild pigs in the backyard, then paid me $2 to collect the tools and bring them back in the house. It was a game I thought my brother might enjoy, but I tried not to think of my brother too much. When I did, I felt sick with missing him. I couldn't forget him if I tried. My grandmother and I had our own routine. I had school and daycare all week, and I got to see a movie and get one toy on Saturdays. We alternated picking the movies, and when it was my turn, I could pick whichever movie I wanted, all by myself. I was electrified by the power of my choice and made my decision based almost exclusively on the posters outside the theater. That's how I ended up picking films like Lorenzo's Oil, Passion Fish, and Groundhog Day. I was easy to please and never protested my grandmother's picks, even after Fire in the Sky made me cry myself to sleep for a week. I'm gonna stop here for a second. Do any of you know what the movie Fire in the Sky is about? Mitch knows. I'm gonna tell you though. Fire in the Sky is about a man who gets abducted and tortured by extraterrestrials. When my grandmother took me to see this movie, I was 5 years old. And when it ended and I tried to run out of the theater, she said, "Wait a minute, I want to read something," and went, "Based on a true story." Appropriate media consumption was not a value in my family. So I just want to explain to you that this is very normal. That my grandma took me to go see What's Love Got to Do with It in theaters when I was 6. And I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but also not super appropriate for a 6-year-old. I always wondered, or at least for a little while, I wondered if maybe my grandpa was different until he spent the night and let me rent a small Quentin Tarantino film called Jackie Brown. Also not appropriate. But I'm better for it. My grandmother was loving, but being comforting wasn't her gift. Each night, she taught me to read, alternating between the Holy Bible, Barbie comics, and supermarket celebrity tabloids. I thought Princess Diana and Mary Magdalene would have looked similar. I thought the same about Billy Ray Cyrus and Jesus. When the thought of alien abduction kept me up, the Star magazine I kept under my pillow reminded me to stop holding my breath. Living with my grandmother and her father in the fields of Missouri, I learned to think only of myself for hours at a time. Spending half a day alone, free of the company of people who would distract me from my being, I learned to think about who I was becoming, and what I wanted. I spent my free time exploring my great-grandfather's land, roaming farther than I was allowed. Too young and dumb to be scared of them, I made a game of sneaking up on and catching garden snakes by the tail. I caught them fast enough to shock them and then dropped them before they caught my skin between their fangs. I was only bitten once. It was fast and painful, but I did not scream. My eyes got wide, and my arms flailed around until it let go. After the garden snake released me, I closed my eyes and leaned against a tree. I steadied my breath and soothed myself by speaking directly into the 2 puncture wounds in my first finger. "It don't hurt, Ashley." I cradled my hand with its opposite. "If it hurt, you'll die. You won't die." On our Christmas visit to Indiana, my mother accused my grandmother of turning me against her. She acts like she doesn't even know who I am. My mother's tongue was coated in venom, her familiar anger rising in the back of her throat. A few days before Christmas, my mother came into the living room and saw me playing with a doll. It was the same doll she'd bought and wrapped for me under the tree. It was a doll she knew I'd love, something she hoped would remind me of the games we used to play and the life we'd had together back when we lived in the studio apartment. Now she was renting a 2-bedroom house with enough room for me to return, but I was still in Missouri. No one thought it would be a good idea for me to move back to Fort Wayne in the middle of a school year, but my mother missed me and she wanted me home. She screamed at me for opening the present, a gift she had to have worked overtime to purchase. I did not only feel distant from my mother, I felt angry with her and unsure of what she wanted with me. She sent me away, called me back, and now she seemed mad that I was here. I started to walk away from her and found myself buried face first in her living room carpet. My mother kicked me. I didn't cry. After a few moments, my mother picked me up and held me against her. Being held was rare and precious, an offering in and of itself. I rejected it, making my body go limp. I hoped she thought I was dead or paralyzed. I wanted her to think she'd really hurt me. I wanted her to apologize like her old boyfriend did. My grandmother walked into the room, took a look at us, and asked what happened. My mother told her I'd opened my gift. My grandmother explained that she'd bought me the same doll in Missouri. My grandmother knelt beside me. "Are you okay, baby?" I looked toward the front door. "I'm fine. It don't hurt. I'm not dead." My mother walked into her bedroom and shut the door. "Grandma, tell her it's okay. I'm not dead. I'm alive." When my grandmother and I returned to the farmhouse, I jumped out of my grandfather's car and ran into the house. I ran into the sitting room where my tea set was always on the back table, then into the bathroom where my good toothbrush was still in the pink cup behind the sink. I touched all the things that reminded me of my new life in Missouri, where no one hit me. I could read as much as I wanted, and there were no rusty red stains left in rings around the bathtub. I spoke to my grandmother without looking at her. "Don't ever make me leave again, okay? I don't want to leave again." She looked down at me, then into the backyard, into the places I played without permission. She grabbed my hand and walked me out toward the trees, grabbing a shovel and a burlap bag next to the grill on the way. We walked farther and farther back until we were in the part of our land where my great-grandfather let the grasses grow long. My grandmother stomped around a bit, then staked the shovel's blade into the dirt. She dug slowly and with purpose, like she was sneaking up on the earth spread out before us. The ground was soft, so it wasn't long before she told me to come closer. I leaned over the hole and saw a garden snake. No, 2, 3, 4, a lot of garden snakes. They were in some sort of a knot, though not stuck together. They moved quickly and deliberately over and around one another. They were not fighting, and they did not seem to be trying to get away from us or anything else. "What are they doing, Grandma?" My grandmother stared into the hole. "They're loving each other, baby." She reached into the bag, poured lighter fluid into the hole, then a lit match. The grass in and around the hole burned, and then so did the snakes. My first instinct was to reach in and throw them as far as I could to safety, but I hesitated when I remembered their bite. I waited too long to do them any good. The snakes did not slither away or thrash around as they burned. They held each other tighter, even as the scales melted from their bodies. Their inclination was to squeeze closer to the other snakes wrapped around them. Their green lengths blackened and bubbled, causing the flesh that simmered underneath each individual metallic hood to ooze. They did not panic. They did not run. I started to cry. "You will have to go back. We'll both go back home. Your mama misses you." My grandmother reached over and grabbed my hand, both of us still staring into the hole. These things catch fire without letting each other go. We don't give up on our people. We don't stop loving them. She looked into my face, her eyes watering at the bottoms. "Not even when we're burning alive." Thank you. Because you're here, I want to tell you just a little bit about the origin of this book, how it came to be. I started this book here in the English department at Ball State. I wrote an essay in Jill Chrisman's nonfiction class, and I wrote it because I had to, not because I wanted to. I did not think nonfiction was something that I was particularly interested in or wanted to be involved in. I only took the class because it was required for me to get my major and because I had seen Jill Chrisman in the hallways and I dug her vibe. So I took the class. I loved it. I enjoyed it. But I had this essay with her notes on it, this essay about my grandmother that held a lot of the story that I just read to you out loud. And Jill made some incredibly insightful notes on that essay, but at the end of it, she wrote, "This was a stunning essay, no doubt the beginning of a stunning book." And I thought she had lost her mind because I couldn't even turn in every assignment in the class. So how am I going to be a person who writes a book? And I didn't know then that being a student is fantastic practice for going out into the world and doing things that mean a lot to you and that can mean a lot to other people. Can it happen while you're here? Absolutely. But what a shame to not get all this time to make some of those missteps and mistakes and get that brilliant, compassionate correction from people who care about you, who care about your work, who care about your future, and who want to see you succeed, not just as a worker, but as a person. I was surrounded, so lucky to be surrounded by people who wanted to see me succeed as a person. And when I read this book, as much as I love the institution of my education, I promise you I do, President Mearns, I realized that what I learned here, more than anything else, was how to be on my own side. How to trust that I had the ability to do things that I had never considered. How to take opportunities that I never thought would be presented to me. How to be more curious than judgmental. And how to move forward in my life even when it felt like my life was ending. I was lucky in that way. Not everybody gets that experience, but I think everybody can have that experience. And I think everybody, absolutely everybody, is worthy of that experience. So when you see something posted about some job or some class or some club or whatever it is, and you think to yourself, I don't know anybody else who looks like me who did that. I don't know anybody else who comes from what I came from who does anything like that. But I feel that curiosity and I feel that interest in myself. Just go for it. Give it a shot. Because falling down here is so much safer than falling down anywhere else. Because here, you do have people who want to lift you up and who want to see you move on past the point that you're at today. Or at least I did, and I hope the same is true for you. You've all been an amazing audience, right? I've been a pretty good reader. At this point, I know that some of you, maybe more than some of you, know a little bit about my career, about my book, about my background, you might have some questions that you would like to ask me. That sounds awesome. I love answering questions. I love answering questions. And the really cool thing about me is that I have learned how to have boundaries. So if you ask a question that I don't want to answer, I'll just tell you very kindly. But there are not a lot of questions that I don't want to answer or that I will not answer. I can't even really think of any. So if you have those questions, please feel free to ask. Just raise your hand and we'll get you a mic and we'll go from there. If you don't have questions, it was great getting to read to you tonight, and I hope to see you again in the future. But questions first. Anybody? Anybody? Look at Gen Z. Y'all always do this. Where are we? Yeah. It's okay. There's a hand over there. Okay. And here's one.
Who was it?
Hi, Ashley. I want to ask you, one of the things I really loved about your book is your talking about the reading you did as a kid, including the stuff that was in this chapter. I wanted to ask you a little bit, if you could talk to us a little bit about how your reading changed, like when you got into college and it was more part of your sort of requirements, and also sort of how your reading is relating to your writing today. Like what's the dialogue between your reading and your writing now?
How you figure out how to tell a story. Oh, thank you. Can you tell I was a theater kid? Because I project. It's how you learn how to tell a story. It's how you learn how to write a story. It's how you learn what the stories you like look like and sound like and feel like. So I read a lot while I was here. I was really deeply in love with online writing communities while I was here. So I used to read a lot of blogs, HTML Giant. I used to read literary journals that were really cool and existed online and in print, like Pink magazine. I also read a lot, and I do mean a lot, of very small books. I don't know what was going on when I was in college, but a lot of people decided to come out with books that were like a quarter of the size of a hardcover, and they would just come out that way, and you'd read them that way. Like Lindsay Hunter had a book called Daddies, and Mary Miller had an amazing book called Big World. And they were these very small books, and I read those things from cover to cover, and I got as many of them as I could. And they weren't things that were necessarily widely available. Like, I definitely wouldn't have walked into Books A Million and found it, but it was something that I loved and that I sought out, and I read a lot of things like that. And now I read even more, probably, but I'm a lot more open about what I'll read now. I will say that when I was in college, I did a lot of judgment of what I liked to read. Like, I got here and suddenly got really insecure about my reading habits. Like, y'all didn't read Fear Street? That's not on your top 10? R.L. Stine isn't a great author to you? That's weird. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that books are books, and reading is fantastic, and anything that interests you is a great thing to spend your time on when it comes to books and reading. The classics are awesome, and they'll be around. They'll be there. But Goosebumps comes once in a lifetime. So please do read those as well, because they're fantastic. Yeah, and I continue to read widely. I continue to read as much as I can, because reading is probably what's made me a better writer than I would have been. Matter of fact, it's not probably. I would have sucked without it. So thanks. Is that Pat? Hey, Pat. We had somebody up here? Yeah. That's really far up. Who gonna make that jog? You? This is, don't look. Okay, I'll tell you guys. Wow. With the mask on, I gotta tell you. A little scary. I haven't really been in front of a crowd before that all have masks on. It makes me feel very safe, but also like, this is what that looks like. Hi.
Oh, hi. Okay, so I really love your book. I love your voice, but see, I'm a little teary-eyed because you remind me of my friend Camille, who's going through something with her mom right now. I'm so sorry to be crying. I really am, but I just want to wonder, how did you deal with your mom acting that way? Because she's lost, and I don't know how to help her, because I always was blessed in a nice family, but I want to know how to help my friend.
Can we repeat the question really quickly, honey? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So my friend's going through something with her mom, and that's why I really loved your book, because you're reminding me of my friend right now, what you read. And I was just wondering, how did you go through that with that? Because I don't know how to help her. She's lost right now. And your book really helped me, because I feel like I needed to be here to just listen to that about my friend. And I'm sorry if I'm crying, but she means a lot to me.
Don't be sorry for crying, ever, ever, ever. First of all, crying is not only natural, it's one of the most healthy things we can do. And the fact that we don't do it is part of the reason why we suffer emotionally, unnecessarily. So, please don't apologize for crying. I welcome your tears, and I'm very happy that you feel comfortable, safe, and open enough to cry in the presence of me right now. Thank you. And I'll say this, I think that sometimes we really want to try to control a situation by thinking that we can fix it. That makes us feel like we have the most power. When we say oh man, if I could just help this person, if I could just fix them. It's not your job to fix anybody. Never, ever your job. It's your job as a friend to be there for them and to support them, especially if they're doing the work to support themselves. And I don't mean getting a job. Nobody cares about that. But I do mean caring for themselves. If you can encourage a person to care for themselves and you can support them while they figure out how to do that, then you're doing enough. Then you're doing enough, more than enough. And you have to let that be okay. You have to do what you can and let it be okay that you're doing what you can. It's okay. It's okay. Hey, guess how I wrote this book? Tons and tons of therapy. So much therapy. A lot of times people will read my book and they'll go, how did you write that? That was so brave. I don't know how you could stand to be that vulnerable. And I tell them the truth because it's important to me that people know the truth. I don't want people to have a delusion about how I did what I did or how I got where I got. It's been a lot of learning how to ask for help. A lot of that. And therapy was a huge part of me asking for help. Another thing that started here on Ball State's campus at the Counseling Center. I'm lucky to have had some incredibly positive experiences at the Counseling Center here on campus when I very much felt alone and I very much felt in the dark and I very much felt not okay. I'm glad that I sought those professional services,
But it is also true, during that time, I could have asked some of my friends and the people locally who love me for help. And I wish that I had coupled my professional help with some of that personal help as well. But I've learned how to do that now, and I do it a lot more often. Some things just need time and the chance to figure it out for yourself. And for good people to stick around and love you through that. So you can be a good person sticking around and just loving somebody through a hard time. Okay? Great. Yes.
Are you satisfied with what you have done, or are you writing anything now?
I'm a Capricorn, so I'm like never satisfied with what I've done. Never, ever satisfied. I'm proud. I'm very proud. I would not say that I am satisfied. I think satisfaction to me sometimes sounds a little too close to complacency, or a little bit too close to just stopping. And that's not my mode. So I'm not satisfied. I am very proud. This is the thing that I am most proud of in my life, aside from my brilliant dog, Astro. And I am working on some new things. We'll see what happens and what becomes of them. I was just walking around the student center parking lot having a conversation with my agent, Maria, who is amazing, and we're absolutely working on things. We have ideas. This is a really good time for me to start something new and put something new out there, and I don't plan on wasting the opportunity. But you know, let's see. Thank you so much for your question. How much time we got? Anybody know? 5 minutes? Let's do one more question. Let's try. One more?
Hi, who were some authors or even books that inspired you during your process of writing this?
Some authors who
Inspired you during your process of writing this novel?
Okay, so I read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings years and years and years ago, and I'm not, please, whenever I say this, people are like, oh, you're like Dr. Maya Angelou. Am I? Not really. But that book was incredibly inspirational to me, and reading it sort of helped me realize and understand that childhood can be a story and its own story, and that I was allowed to write about my childhood in a way that took my child emotions seriously. So that was incredibly important to me. I also read a lot of Tayeri Jones. She has a fantastic book called Silver Sparrows and another book called An American Marriage that blows me away every time I read it, and I've reread it a few times. A book I got as a gift was a first edition copy of the poetry of Gwendolyn Brooks, and that kind of ripped me up in the most perfect way and helped me expose some of the parts that I didn't realize could even be interesting to write about in a memoir, and continue to do that. And then there's also always my friend and mentor, Roxane Gay, who writes brilliantly and who is a brilliant person, who believed in me from jump. Reading her books and knowing who she is and like having her as a friend really, really helped me imagine a life for myself and a career for myself that I hadn't previously thought was possible. So those are probably the people who I read the most and who gave me the most inspiration while I was writing the book. But I kind of feel like every book I've ever read and loved has some piece in it. Anything that encouraged my love of reading is what helped me get to a place where I could love my writing. So, yeah. Is that helpful? Yes. Good. I think we're done. And I'm so sad about that because I have loved talking to you. But I'll be back. I'll be back 2 more times this semester. I'll be back in October and November. I hope to see some of you there or around. And if I don't, then, you know, we'll catch each other on the flip side. Right? Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I tried.